The advice and opinions expressed by Dr. Granpeesheh and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen. Good morning and welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen. I'm Shannon Penrod and look who's here. It's Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh. Good morning.
I love your pink sweater. It's beautiful.
Well, I wore this specifically to be pink for you today. I was like, I'm here with Dr. Granpeesheh. I gotta bring the bright. So it's just for you.
And I apologize to you and to all of our viewers for not being able to do the show last week because I was stuck in a storm.
Well, and it was me the week before. So we're all doing the best that we can, right?
Yeah.
But we're here today, and for those of you who don't know Dr. Granpeesheh, it's like going to be your birthday today because you get to hear her wise words today as she shares information. She's been working in this field for more than 40, I think we're at 45 now. It's some ridiculous number that doesn't look possible when we look at your face. But she's been working in this field for a really long time. She's devoted herself to individuals on the spectrum and their families and helping us all to find pathways and answers so that we can all lead our best lives. And that's really important. It's been important to me in my lifetime. Don't get me crying. Because since we last were here, my child turned 21.
I know.
Craziness, right? But anyway, so I'm very grateful to Dr. Granpeesheh, as are so many other people, and grateful that she donates this hour to be able to answer your questions from around the world. We're live right now on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can be writing in right now in real time. For those of you who are tuning in later, and we know that that's the vast majority of you, catch the show in podcast or on our very robust YouTube channel. We've been doing this for 14 years. So there are 14 years of episodes of Ask Dr. Doreen that you can go through and see if your question has already been asked and answered. But we always love to have, it's very nuanced. Send your question. We're happy to answer it live here on the show. I mentioned podcasts. Wherever you get your podcasts, it's a free download. We hope that you will embrace the sponsors that you will hear on the free download. They're what's making it free for you. If you are doing something, some of you have written in and said, but I jog and I really just want to hear Dr. Granpeesheh. I don't want to hear the ads. I'm willing to pay a little bit. We have made that possible for you. If you go to glow.fm/autism live, then for just $5 a month, you can have a ad-free version of absolutely everything that we do on the Autism Network. That means Autism Live, that means Ask Dr. Doreen. We launched our newest podcast last week. It's an audio podcast called Today's Hyperfixation with Atticus Jackson, and you'll get that as well. They are an individual who identifies as being on the spectrum, talking about the things that they're hyperfixated on. It's really super fun. They also were one of the people doing the interviews at the Ed Asner poker tournament on Saturday, so you're going to see a lot of Atticus coming up. He's our intern. They are our intern. Excuse me. Sorry. I'm trying to do better. I'm working on it.
No problem. And how was the Ed Asner poker tournament this weekend? I saw some pictures.
It was really fun. We have a bunch of pictures that we're going to be posting too. It was really fun. They raised some money for the center, which was lovely. There were a lot of people that showed up and expressed a great deal of love. Holly Robinson Pete and her husband Rodney sent their love to you, as did many other people. So we'll have some fun interviews for you to see. There were lots of celebrities, and there was a very interesting reunion. Maureen McCormick was there, who played Marcia on the original Brady Bunch, and then the actress who had played Jan in the movies later on was there also. So I think it was the second time that they've ever been together. So it was a very strange reunion. but very fun for all of us to be there and witness. So really, really fun. Okay, so, but we have to talk about the things that you guys want to talk about. Our topic today is knowing when to push your child and when is it too much, because this is a hard thing for a lot of us. I want to say hello to Rodney, who's already with us, Susie, who's already with us, and Fixion. We're happy that you guys are here. We're going to get to a question that one of you had written in just a second, but I want to have Dr. Granpeesheh answer our first question. Somebody wrote in and said, I hope you can help me. I'm painfully aware of the fact that my child has a diagnosis that is considered a disability. I also know that he's capable of learning. It just takes him longer. Here is my never-ending question. How do I know when to push him and when I'm pushing too hard? There are so many times when I just don't know if he is doing or not doing something because he can't or he just doesn't know how to yet. This weighs on me. I don't want to be asking him to do things he can't do, but I also don't want to coddle him to the point where it is me getting in the way of his progress. I appreciate any insight. I love this question because I can relate to this so deeply. It's always that tussle of when do I push and when am I pushing too hard?
Yeah, absolutely. And to a much lesser degree, I guess, Shannon, all parents, I think, go through that with their kids, right? And much more so when a child is on the spectrum, because you just don't know. You don't know what the capabilities are. Should I keep pushing or not? And this is a very, very important question, not for many different reasons. One reason, obviously, is you don't want to push the child to the point where they become frustrated and start to just avoid, interaction and you and anyone who's trying to teach them. Because what you then would have is a child who is showing challenging behaviors, perhaps in order to avoid or escape any kind of learning opportunity. So you definitely don't want to push too hard. On the other hand, you don't want to back off, because that is kind of one of the things that too often happens, which is very unfortunate, because the world thinks that just because there is a diagnosis of a disability, that we should completely back off and not even help the individual learn things that are going to help them do very well in society, thrive in society. So there has to be a balancing act here. It is very important. And for me, it really is all about observing the individual and making sure that it's fair, right? This is where that fair thing comes into mind, because really what you have to be doing is push, because you always want your child to learn as much as they can. This is for any child with any disability or no disability, right? The more they learn, the more they're going to thrive in society and life. But at the same time, you don't want to stress them out. You don't want to be the person that causes them any additional stress, anxiety, just feeling of hopelessness, feeling of I'm not good enough. So you have to always keep an eye on that. And the way to do it is just to look at your child's demeanor. How are they doing? Are they happy? Am I rewarding them enough? When I introduce things, do I introduce new topics at an easy enough level where my child is challenged, interested, but not avoidant? Am I able to balance it out so that along with all the other things they're practicing in life or have just learned, I'm not overwhelming my child? So I think those are all the different things to pay attention to, and every child is different. So you really do need to just pay attention to your child's response level. That doesn't mean giving up the very first time your child objects. Imagine if we all gave up when our typically developing kids objected to going to school or objected to having piano lessons. I don't know, no one would be going to school, right? So there's a certain level of, encouragement and prompting and kind of supporting and pushing. But at the same time, there's a lot of reward and just making sure that you're reasonable about it, right? And when you work with professionals, if you have a child who's on the spectrum and you're working with someone who's a professional, they should be able to tell you when enough is enough. Like sometimes I've had families where we will actually say, okay, your child he's not going to pick up vocal language. We've tried for the last year. It's time to teach him some other form of communication because we don't want him to be frustrated and angry, and it's important for him to be able to communicate. And parents just feel like, no, I just kind of really want him to talk. And that can also be unhealthy. It can be unhealthy for the family, for the child. And so we want to be realistic, but at the same time, listen, there are so many kids, Shannon, where I don't want to let go. I'm not ready to let them go because I know they're capable of doing so much more.
Yeah. I think this gets right to the crux of so many of the conversations right now. I have to say that on Thursday, for our Best of Autism Live, we're replaying an episode that we just filmed about a month ago with an amazing self-advocate, Shane Newmeyer. And it's one of the interviews I'm most proud of in the 14 years that we've been doing this, because I feel like there's this thing right now that I think is a misunderstanding, that there are some self-advocates who are saying to parents, it's important that you stop worrying about teaching your child things and accept who they are. And I think that what is meant by that is made clear, because Shane has been a very outspoken person of the self-advocates about, let's not do anything that's cruel. But one of the things that Shane talks about is that it's also cruel to not allow somebody to learn. And that I think it gets right to the heart of this question about when are you pushing for a result, right? And when are you teaching somebody? And I love your advice about look at your child, let your child's behavior tell you a little bit about what's going on. The funny thing about it is that as parents, we always say, if anybody asks us, what do you want more than anything else in the world? We say we want to be able to communicate with our child. But one of the things is that we often miss some of the communication that is happening. And that if we slow our roll a little bit, sometimes we can see when they're telling us, I'm done for the day, which is not I'm done forever.
That's right. That's very true. And Shannon, this is worth kind of discussing a little bit more because there is this thing going on right now, which is kind of like, we got to back off. In fact, the other day I was reading something that someone had written about actually, why are we even trying to teach individuals with autism to behave in the same manner as other people, typically developing people? And maybe we should learn from them how to act and behave. And so it can go to, the discussions that are occurring right now can go to an extreme. There are, as you know, Shannon, there's a lot of parents who have severe kids or even adults on the spectrum. And those parents are pretty upset about this discussion because they're saying, listen, come and live with a severe individual for a day, and then you can tell me we can leave it alone. Right? You can't leave it alone in some situations when the individual is trying to hurt themselves or others, or is so frustrated they can't communicate what's going on with them, can't communicate pain. We just don't know how to help them, right? And the only way that we will learn more and know how to help the individual is by entering their world and getting them to enter our world a little bit as well, so that we can meet there and learn more about what's going on with them. So that is part of it. The other part of it, obviously, is that we're talking about children in most cases, and it is very hard. So when you look at, I'm just going to give an example of other types of issues in psychology, let's say anxiety, right? And usually when there's an adult comes to you and says, I need help, I have extreme levels of anxiety, or extreme levels of depression, or extreme levels of obsessive compulsive behavior, why do they actually come and seek help? The reason they seek help is because they want to be able to interact with society. right? They don't want to self-isolate. So the assumption should be that it's best for our kids for us to be able to teach them things that will help them interact with society and be part of society, be part of the world. And it is very difficult when you're the parent making that choice for your child, because you just don't, we love our kids so much. I mean, it's hard to even let a child cry, a baby cry, when you're trying to teach them to stay asleep. You know what I mean? So it's a normal thing for parents to want to back off right now. And of course, there are self-advocates who are so advanced and so minimally affected by autism that they can actually come and join this discussion.
Yeah.
Right? Which is indicative of how minimally affected they are. But then there are also individuals who are much more affected by autism, and I don't think it's right that we should stop helping those individuals gain skills so that they can communicate with others, tell them their needs, their pains, the things they don't want to interact in, all the things that we communicate as people.
Absolutely. Ernesto has joined us and wants us to know, they say, hello from North Carolina. I have high functioning autism and I'm in my 30s, so we welcome you, Ernesto. Fixion had written a question early on. They said, how do you get a 14-year-old teenager who has very rigid thinking to get out of the cycle of perseverating on negative thoughts such as, why am I such a stupid autistic kid? What about my future? And my heart squeezes, because we see this in a lot of our teens, that there is a perseverative, negative self-talk that happens that's very real and very debilitating. So what can we tell them?
Yeah, and again, this is one of those things that probably happens more with autism, but it also happens with just the typically developing population. And these days it happens even more than any time ever in history, right? And some of this has to do with just social media and having access to these kind of fake images of perfections that always make us feel like failures, right? A lot of kids are going through these types of things right now. Why am I not good enough as what I see on my phone? And so the same argument when it's an individual with autism, I'm so glad that this question came up, because Shannon, one of the things I often tell people, parents, when the child is younger, and it's never too late, is everyone is good at something. Every single person is good at something, and you need to find what that is for your child, and you need to nurture it, nourish it, support it, teach your child more in that area, and help them feel better about themselves. Self-esteem is a huge part of getting ahead in life. Huge, right? Probably one of the most important things that we can teach our kids is feeling good enough. So, and it obviously it becomes harder for those on the spectrum. We need to find the things that they're good at. It could be anything, honestly. A lot of our kids are talented. I'm not even just talking about talents in the arts, in music, in so many different ways, but a lot of our kids just have brilliant memories. A lot of our kids have, can be very good at making jewelry, at doing crafts, at doing sewing, whatever it is. All of our kids are good at something. And you need to be able to find that thing. I mean, one of our, a good example is one of our, probably, I'd say someone who's very, very affected by autism, is an adult now. And his parents, mainly his mom, but dad as well, had very early on gave him an out to kind of express himself through art. And his paintings now are on display in a lot of different galleries, and his art is sold for quite a bit of money. And, that has become a way for him to really, really express himself and feel good about himself. And I think that it is possible for everyone to find that thing that the child is good at. And also, the second thing I want to say is that peer groups are very important, right? It's like I remember one of our families had started this thing for adults on the spectrum where they would gather and watch a movie on Friday nights. And it was like a very, very life-changing type of thing. It was a very simple thing. It was like 4 or 5 individuals would get together, but it made them feel part of a community. And when you feel part of a community, it helps you feel better about yourself. You stop just, being down on yourself. And so a lot of those types of things help. And let me also say, I'm always very concerned about depression in general, in autism or outside of autism, especially if it's a teen, because it's pretty common with teens. Get professional help if your child is really experiencing depression. Those expressions of why am I not as good as others are kind of indicative of either the beginning or deep into depression. So please be cautious about that, because depression can become a very scary thing. See a psychologist, see a psychiatrist, so you can potentially look at medications for your child, very helpful there. And make sure your child is not exposed to things that might potentially make him feel just not good enough. That could be on social media again, or any other avenue where he's getting these ideas.
They added to it and said he has been diagnosed with depression, anxiety, OCD, ADHD, as well as autism. So those things do not help him. He sees a therapist and a psychiatrist. But I think, some of what you said, Dr. Granpeesheh, I think for all of us, it's so important that we as parents build our kids up and give them self-esteem. But I do think that around 14, somewhere around that in the teenage years, our kids start to look to people outside of us to help define themselves. And if you think about that, in any other era, in any other time, we would not allow a stranger to walk up to our child and say something to them about themselves, about what they look like, about a diagnosis that they have, a medical diagnosis. We would never have allowed that. But by virtue of allowing them to be online, that happens. And sometimes they're not actually saying it to your child, they're just saying it. It's why, we react so heavily whenever a celebrity says something that is not inclusive of autism, right? It's the reason, because it goes to all of our kids. So I especially I remember when Jem was a teenager and the study came out of UC Santa Barbara about bullying, and it said that the best defense against any bullying is to have friends, to have friends around you who appreciate you for something that you do. And what they were encouraging all of us to do is, if there wasn't already a club at our child's junior high or high school where our child would be not only included but be appreciated for one of their talents, if that didn't exist, to create it. The example that they gave was a kid who likes to draw, and they created a graphic arts club, and suddenly they met like people, and the bullying couldn't take effect because they were part of a herd, they were protected. So it's hard. It's really, really hard. And I want to say, for your 14-year-old who's perseverating on that, it can be really, really hard. But if you start with, as Dr. Granpeesheh said, what do they love? What are they good at? What are they interested in? And then how can you build a group of people around that? We didn't do a Friday night movie, but we did a Friday afternoon after school video game thing. And he was allowed to have 3 friends. And let me tell you, I allowed them to trash my house on Friday afternoon. They threw popcorn. My husband would run to In-N-Out and get the milkshakes. We made it as reinforcing as possible for all of them, and we relaxed all the rules so that they had an outlet. And my son was like the cool kid who had this place happening at his home.
Yeah.
It helps. It helps.
It helps a lot. It helps a lot. And I guess now knowing that this individual also has these other diagnoses, I just want to like uh, suggest a few other things as well.
Sure.
Because I'm always very, very worried about anxiety and depression, not just in our kids, but in general. Anxiety and depression pretty much are the same thing, but can be very harmful and hurtful and debilitating. So, if you know, and the way to look at it, I think, is what do we do when a typically developing person has anxiety or depression, right? How do we treat that? And generally speaking, there's a couple of different ways, and severe depression has different things, but in general, when we're talking about anxiety, depression, you do basically two things. You work with medication, and always, by the way, in mental health, there's hundreds of articles that show the combination of a biochemical and a mental solution together, a psychological and a biochemical solution together, are what works the best. So that's basically means find the right medications. That's super important, and it can take time, and people give up. But the reason that it takes time is that there are a lot of very, very good medications right now for that work focus on antidepressants. Antidepressants work on depression and anxiety. So basically, there's lots of really good antidepressants out there, but they all have different chemical shapes. Could be the same chemical, but they're different chemical shapes. So you have to try them different, right? There's serotonin reuptake inhibitors, norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. You just have to try a variety until you get the one that really works. And each time that you try one, it takes about a month, 3 weeks to 4 weeks before you can really see a significant effect. So it's very hard to find the right dose, to find the right combination. Sometimes psychiatrists might give you more than one. And so once you have found that, it kind of just takes the edge off, and it makes you less just, you know, having that pain or angst in your heart, right? But you're still having both thoughts and activities in real life that provoke that feeling of anxiety or depression. For example, for this young man, it might be seeing something that makes him feel not good enough, or hearing something that makes him feel not good enough. So you also need the kind of psychological side, which for anyone who just has anxiety, depression, it's just therapy, right? Talking to a therapist. And the therapist generally will be helping you using most often the techniques of cognitive behavior therapy to help you understand that your thoughts are faulty. Cognitive behavior therapy is based on that premise that what you're thinking is actually causing you more distress than reality, that your thought is what's wrong. It's not, there's nothing wrong in reality, but you feel because of what you're thinking. And if we can change your thoughts, then the way you feel is going to change. And it's very, very, very effective. Now, and Shannon, I talk about CBT, or cognitive behavior therapy, quite a lot, and it benefits a lot of our higher functioning individuals, but individuals who are more affected and have a difficult time reasoning, have a difficult time understanding more about their thoughts being different from who they are, their thoughts affecting their emotions, all of those are very abstract concepts. With those individuals, it might be a little bit harder for them to understand, let's say, the concept of one of the cognitive behavior therapy concepts is called catastrophizing, right? Where something happens and we immediately think the worst, right? It's not like an event happens and you think, oh my, you take it, your thoughts take it to the level of a catastrophe. Now, explaining that to an individual who has autism might be harder for them to understand. So but even though it might be harder, you should do that. You should really try to focus on using visuals. We would always use like comic strips, or we would draw. Try to explain to the individual that they are not necessarily their thoughts. Their thoughts influence how they feel, separate for them what you think, what you hear, what you think, what you feel, your heart, etc., and help them to reverse those thoughts if possible, right? Help them to see that something that they might have heard doesn't have anything at all to do with them. Or even if someone says something mean to them, let's say there's a bully or something, help them understand that that individual has their own issues and that we don't necessarily go through life listening to everyone's comments. There's talking with the child and allowing the child to express themselves is so important. A lot of times, the severity of these types of disorders like anxiety, depression, OCD, even things like that, the severity decreases when we allow the individual just to express themselves and talk about how they feel, and for us to be able to reframe their thinking and their feeling that way. So that's just something I wanted to throw out there as well. It's important to get that help to the individual.
I so appreciate that. They wrote in some more information. They said it's hard that he notices how different he is from his friends now, why they can do things that he cannot do, and why they are socially more capable than he is. They go on to say that he is in cognitive behavioral therapy, which is wonderful. It is still hard for him to get rid of the intrusive and maladaptive thoughts. He has a high IQ and can understand these things, but he gets stuck.
Well, so that's great to know, because if he has a high IQ, then you should be looking at other things that he is possibly even better than his peers.
Yeah.
I mean, like the number of kids that I've worked with who are just incredible at, let's say, visual memory tasks or math or things or music. Get him engaged in a different social group. When you say his friends, perhaps he can also be part of other social groups where he's at the top. Yeah. Right? And he's thriving and he's doing really well and feeling good about himself. Look for that.
Yeah. I have a friend who gets emotional when people use the words high functioning, and I don't think...
I know. I hate to use those words too. I wish there was a better way to express it. Maybe individuals who need less support. But there is such a huge difference and huge spectrum,
But the example that she uses is that she has a son that is non-vocal. So people a lot of times don't refer to him as high functioning. And she says, but it depends on the context. That if you ask him to do an accounting problem, he's not going to be the high functioning person. But if you take him on the side of a mountain and lay out all the gear because you're going to climb the mountain, he's going to be the most high functioning person on the side of the mountain because that's his interest. And that's where we get to context and interest. So
that's kind of the type of environment I was kind of suggesting we should look for, is that everyone's good at something. Right. And so with my apologies, when I refer to high functioning, I'm talking about someone who is able to interact with society close to the majority of people around them. Let's put it that way. Right. Social interaction, which is the key for whatever we do to try to help our individuals thrive. But and so absolutely, I love that idea of being that's something I would not have thought about, but I'm glad you said that, because a lot of our kids actually do have incredible balance and physical skills that we tend not to support, right? Because when they're young, the number of parents who've said to me, it scares me to death because he's able to climb on anything and everything. Well, those kids are the ones that actually become incredible climbers and mountain climbers and gymnasts and have skills that a lot of other kids don't have.
Yeah. And they said, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Lucy wants to know, my child is almost 7 years old. When is it best to tell them that they have autism? Big question.
Very, very important question. A lot of people ask me that question. It really, I think it really is a situational thing. It has to do with your child and I guess your preferences as well. So sooner or later, and this goes back to the level of understanding of the child. So let's say a child is starting to feel different from their peers, similar to the question we just had before. Now, will it do the child harm or will it benefit them to know about the diagnosis? And the way that you present it is very, very important, right? And on the one hand, I think that we have gone a little bit too far in society, but I do love the fact that over the past 20, 30, 40 years, the world has become so much more accepting and inclusive of all differences, not just autism. So I think that if you were now to tell an individual, 7 might be a little young, but if they're well aware that there are differences that they have with their peers, then it's not too young. But at some point, you want to be able to tell the individual, you have your brain functions a little bit differently. You learn things in a different way. You can take in a lot of information, but you just organize things in your brain a little differently, or whatever is the I guess I don't want to say type of autism, but whatever, our kids are so different from each other, right? And some kids have issues with taking in visual information, other kids have issues with vocalizing, other kids have, and you want to be able to explain that this doesn't mean, it's not, when you describe it, don't describe it in a way that it is worse than anyone else. It's just different. It is a different way of experiencing the world. Sensory, it's a different way of experiencing the world. Learning is a different way of experiencing the world. And make sure that when you do explain that to your child, it is not, it's only to do good, right? Because if we start telling our kids labels very early on, you just have to make sure that there's a good reason that you're telling them at that point. Either, people have already mentioned it to them. Sometimes I've had children come to me and they've seen it, they've heard it, again, social media, TV, whatever, and they've come back and said, is that me? And a lot of people have told me it gives them a sense of inclusion. It gives them a sense of belonging when they have clarity on the diagnosis, like, oh, I'm not alone. It's not me. Like, there's a group of us that are this way, that we learn differently. And I think that's really, really important, as well as to think, like, how is the child, what is it that's happening in your world right now, and your child is 7, that is coming to your mind? Maybe I should tell him. What's causing that? There's got to be something. Just make sure that you're doing it for all the right reasons.
There we go. Can I give 2 examples?
Yeah.
2 extreme examples. So when Jem was diagnosed at 2.5, I'm a control freak, and my biggest fear was that somebody was going to come along and put a connotation on the word autism that I was not in control of. So we decided that we were going to use the word autism in every 3rd sentence in a very positive way from the time he was 2.5. And so we did. And we talked about autism all the time, every day, like it was, just another thing. And that was the path that we chose. I had a friend that chose an entirely different path and said, I don't want to fill his head with that, because they were afraid that it was going to be a limiting thing. So we were both doing ABA intensively, and they referred to their therapists as coaches. And they never used the word autism, didn't talk about that, didn't do anything, and didn't tell him until he was 13, maybe. And I just want to say that both young men experienced different things in different ways that were hard and different things that were good, and they're both okay. So, I do think, if we stay positive, however we do it, as you said, that's the key.
Yeah, it absolutely is. But a lot of, I think people who have come to me, there have been people who are diagnosed and have come to me and said, once I knew what it was, or that there were others like me, it made me feel calmer.
Yeah.
So I do I have heard that, so I just want to put that out there too.
I
But then
agree.
on the other hand, there are also lots of scenarios. It's very individualized. You're absolutely right, Shannon. There are people, there are families who they themselves, and this is a cultural thing too. There are certain cultures and countries where it's very hidden, and nobody talks about it, and it's frowned upon.
Yeah.
And that attitude definitely flows through to the individual.
Yeah.
So as long as we all have a positive attitude about it and we just see it as, oh, wow, this is a really interesting way of learning. It's a very interesting and different way of experiencing the world.
Yes.
Then that's what's going to flow through, and that's what's
Absolutely.
important.
Brian has written and said, "Good words, doctor." He also said, "I'm listening to every word. Thank you." Their child is almost 7, used to and does still say, "I'm stupid." Yet he is twice exceptional and in areas 99%. Finding a social circle is still a big problem, and I think I know now that he is different. He knows he has autism and others have ADHD. We are still treading carefully with this and have talked about how many successful people with ASD were working slowly. Any thoughts? You just spoke to this. Different has merged with self-esteem. I know for us, we were always interested in showing role models. And it was interesting that at the time that Jem was being diagnosed and we were starting to use the word autism all the time, James Durbin was on American Idol. That was the year that he was, and we would always point to him and go, who do you like on American Idol? We like James. Isn't James is cool? James is awesome. You know what James has? James has the ability to play the piano. James has the ability to write a song. James has Tourette's syndrome, and James has autism. And you have autism, and you like music, and that's literally how we would word it. And we would always be excited when James was on and be rooting for James and vote for James. And years later, my son got to meet James, and it was a big moment for us. And we told him how much of a role model he was, because he was cool.
Absolutely. It's interesting you say this, Shannon, because I remember I was doing some training for large organizations, right? It's very, very big corporations where I was trying to teach them, the executives, kind of how to accommodate individuals who were starting to work there, who had autism. And this was all about accommodations and coaching and like the things that you can do to make it more feasible for an individual on the spectrum to succeed, right, in an corporate environment, let's say. So I remember when I did several of these back in, like, I think it was 2018 or so, or maybe 2019. And as I did them, I started to realize that I don't want people to walk away from this thinking that this is such a like significant disability that they have to like walk on eggshells around this individual, right? At the same time that I want people to be accommodating, I also want them to be respectful of the person on the spectrum. So I then I actually added a slide to my PowerPoint towards the end saying, by the way, all of these individuals have said they have autism. And if you look at the incredible human beings in the world right now who have declared that they've been diagnosed with autism, it's a pretty amazing group of people, right?
Yeah.
Everyone from, I don't know, Dan Aykroyd has said he has autism to Elon Musk. Like there are genius, brilliant people out there.
Anthony Hopkins,
who've changed the world, who have changed the world we live in, and they are fully diagnosed individuals. So I think that you always need to also mention that, because when people think differently, they're thinking out of the box, right? So they will find solutions that no one else up to this point in the world has ever thought of. Einstein, like, is a good example, and there's lots of articles about how Einstein had Asperger's. So it's very interesting and important to talk about both sides of it, right?
Yes.
Learning differently doesn't mean not being able to learn. It means literally seeing things that the rest of us have not yet seen.
Yeah. I love that Temple Grandin talks about that all the time, Dr. Grandin. She always says that the Fukushima power plant accident would never have happened if they had neurodiverse people on the team, because she said I took one look at the plans and I could have told you that was going to happen. So, right? We need people who see the world differently. I want to get to one of the questions that we had about pushing. My wife and I are not in agreement about how to handle our son's outbursts when he doesn't want to do something, like pick up his toys. He loves Matchbox cars and has over 100 of them. They are often scattered all over the house, and we have all come close to breaking bones when we step on them. Our son is 4 and he is autistic, but I think he should be responsible for picking up his cars every night. My wife thinks this is too much for him. This is just one example. I see these kids when they are older, and some of them are doing great. They are polite and conscientious. But I also have seen kids who behave badly and the parents excuse it, saying he has autism, he doesn't know better. I don't want my son to be like that. Where is the line for expectations? How can I help my wife to see that she needs to expect more? And how do I know if I am expecting too much? What a great dad.
What a great question.
Yeah.
What an amazing, I mean, it just basically summarizes everything we're talking about today. Right? It's like, how far do I go or don't go? One parent doesn't want to go there and the other parent does. So and a lot of times that kind of conflict does occur in families. So yeah, thanks for sending that question in. I think that it's the Matchbox car question is kind of an interesting one. And if you do it right, just picking up toys and putting them in a basket is not really going to be too much for anyone, right? So consider that it is a task that very likely your child is able to complete, but perhaps you need to take a little bit longer to teach it, prompt a little bit more, and reward a little bit more, right? A lot of times, it's not that our kids can't do things, it's that the way to learn how to do that thing is a little different. So that's why ABA is around, because that's the very effective way to teach how to do things. Whereas like typically developing kids might learn by just imitating or observing once. With our kids, they might need the steps broken down. They might need it to be smaller chunks. They might need to be rewarded for each chunk. And then, then they feel very good when the whole sequence is done. It doesn't mean that they can't do the task. So I would say when there's a disagreement between parents, you meet in the middle, help him with the task, and also reward him a lot. But also, push him to the extent that he is capable. That is a pretty easy task. And I promise you, any child, no matter what level of severity, can master that task as long as it is broken down and rewarded and modeled and supported and so on. Okay? And so the other side of it, and this is just one task that this family is writing in about, there's going to be other tasks, and there's going to be other tasks and each time a task comes up, you're going to have to evaluate it in 2 ways. Again, this is the stuff we were talking about before, but it brings in a different, very important variable. So the 2 things we're talking about before were like, is my child really capable of doing this? And if it's a simple task like that, then yes, they very likely are. You just have to teach it. You have to be more careful about it, gentle, reward a lot and get the child to do the task, because you want them to be able to fit into society a little bit better. Child's 4 right now. In a couple of years, they'll be in school. Is the teacher going to expect your child to put away their stuff? Yes, they are. So if you've already taught that skill, your child's going to be ahead when it comes to that, right? No, in class, those are the types of things that help our kids get ahead, is learning how to do these kind of like preparatory tasks. So whatever you can teach your child at this point at home to do, like cleaning up his toys, is a good thing. It is something that is going to help him get forward in life, in society. And that's a perfect example of what's very important to teach our kids and why we do what we do. What if you don't teach this to him? What will happen is he'll go to school, the teacher will be requiring this of him, and either if you have a good teacher and a low student to teacher ratio, the teacher and the aide are able to teach your child, or your child will tantrum, will be upset because now he's 5 or 6 and it's the first time anyone is asking him to put stuff away. So then he might have a very strong reaction, which would trickle and cause all kinds of problems in school and potentially through life. So the sooner we can take these tasks, don't be afraid of them, break them down, teach your child, just like if you don't teach your child how to brush their teeth, they're probably going to end up with cavities. That's just a very basic example. Some of these things that you're thinking about, you can teach. It's just about how to teach it. And the more you teach, remember the other side of not just fitting into society, but is feeling good about yourself.
Yeah.
When our kids learn these things and are able to do the things that others do, they feel good about themselves. They feel proud when a child cleans up his toys. What's going to happen? You and mom are both going to be like, yay, you did it. That's awesome. Great job. That would be a reward that he would otherwise miss if you didn't do that for him. So give our kids the opportunity to learn because they're worth it and they can do it. And it's just all about helping them get there.
Yeah, I really appreciate that because we just a bit before we're talking about self-esteem. And where does
Yes.
self-esteem start? Self-esteem starts with having some autonomy and being able to pick up your choice.
Achievement. Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, critical stuff, but I love the question. We had one more question about that kind of stuff. My 16-year-old son is being a couch potato this summer. I can't get him to do anything. I am thinking of getting him a job volunteering at a local dog shelter. Is that putting too much pressure on him?
Well, first of all, that's a great question. It's not only in autism, a 16-year-old son. Lots of people go through this. I don't think it's too much pressure, but I do think, I guess you could do that, and I would do it a little bit differently. I guess I would try to do something that motivates him to want to take the job at the shelter. Like I'm a parent, and you could be either way, right? I mean, we can, when we want to change behavior, you can modify antecedents, the things that happen before the behavior, or you can modify consequences, things that happen after the behavior. So I tend to try to do a lot of modification of antecedents and consequences in order to motivate my kids to do things themselves, right? I like to work on their motivation. In this case, I think if you, I don't know, what are the things that are important to your son? Like maybe he likes to have candy. I don't know. Like maybe he likes computer games or computer time. Put a price on those things, right? If you're going to, don't just offer free reinforcers. A lot of these things should be worked for. So I need you to spend half an hour a day working at the shelter, and then you can have an hour a day being a couch potato. Let me just also talk about that for a minute too. It's funny because I have 3 kids, and they all have different levels of self-regulation is what I call it, right? So one of my kids is extremely regulated. Like she will do everything by the book, and she's extremely advanced in every possible way, in her education, in her crafts, in her art, in her talents, whatever. But she's pretty hard on herself. And with her, I'm constantly telling her to practice an hour of being a couch potato. I am constantly telling her to practice the other side, which is give yourself grace, reward yourself, relax a little bit. My other daughter is pretty balanced when it comes to that kind of stuff. She does a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But I always have to like also remind her, like, don't forget you're supposed to finish this course. Don't forget you're supposed to do that, right? Because she's the youngest, she's much younger. But and then my son in the middle, I think now, for most of his as he was growing up, he was the one that I would say like do a little bit more work for that level of reinforcer, but now he's very balanced. It's always about teaching our kids to balance, right? To do a little bit of what they don't want to do for a certain amount of what they do want. And I think that's kind of where you are, but you got to work a little bit on motivating him to do that. Like just take him to the shelter and maybe he'll love being around the dogs, right? And start slow. Again, with our kids, you need to motivate them in a different way. Small chunks of demand, very high reinforcers, and then gradually change it so that it's pretty even. If that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. I love that. And of course, my concern is too, when they go to the dog shelter, who's working with them and what are they like, and are they making it reinforcing? Like you might have to babysit
Absolutely.
that a little bit too.
Absolutely.
Sometimes
it's
you
a
look.
bad example, Shannon. It's just because like I often think like if I could choose in my life what I would do, I would like buy a piece of land and bring 500 dogs on there and just live with them. So dog shelter to me is pure reward. You know what I mean? But you're right. Like you have to be with people who are rewarding. You have to know the tasks. You have to know the tasks. Like what if a task at the dog shelter involves cleaning poop? Like that's going to be a very not rewarding activity, right? So it has to be balanced.
Yeah. Well, and I'm always concerned about the people. Like I think dogs are rewarding, and I think there are even circumstances where it would be rewarding to clean up the dog poop. But if you have somebody who's a taskmaster who's not saying good job or saying it's so important when you do that because the dog really feels it, you know, if there's somebody who's just and doesn't give them a checklist but says go fix this and doesn't tell them what my expectation is, that's the kind of thing that I'm always painfully aware of. And I will tell you, we've done some interviews with Dr. Grannon where she talks about volunteer jobs and things of that nature for kids of this age. And she has some great advice in some of her books and in some of the interviews that we've, like the most recent one that we did, she talks specifically about this, about the importance of checklists and making sure that the people that are working with them are making it fun and interesting and asking them what they're interested in. But you know, her mother used to go make her muck the stalls.
I know.
That was the thing. But her mother would say to her, you can't just sit and draw horses all day long. You need to go muck the stalls. And while you're mucking the stalls, look at how the anatomy of the horse. So when you draw the horse, you're going to be that much better at it, you know? And look at where she ended up. She's not only a brilliant professor, but when you see her schematics for things, the artist that she is, it's absolutely amazing. But somehow we're out of time. Somehow we're over time. But I want to thank everybody for your questions and writing in. I especially want to thank Dr. Granpeesheh for being the wonderful expert that you are and for making time for this. I want to remind everybody that tomorrow's show is just, viewers asked for, it's just a show about 504s. We're giving you the top things that you need to know about 504 plans. Then on Thursday, Best of Autism Live, that's that interview with Shane Newmeyer. I really hope that you guys will watch it. And on Friday, it's the Best of Ask Dr. Doreen. And it's the whole episode that you did, Dr. Granpeesheh, about making it fair, which we touched on a little bit during today. So great episode. We hope that you guys will tune in and see all of that. We'll be back tomorrow with a show about 504. Thank you, Dr. Granpeesheh. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
Bye, everyone.
Don't forget, you can watch Ask Dr. Doreen live every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We hope to see you there.